Hello Renaissance artists, we are now in Module 6 of this first year of the Academy. Very excited to do these next 2 weeks. I'm going to be doing a Rembrandt self-portrait in our master copy module. So I think that this should be informative, and I thought that it'd be a good segue as we go into portraiture. So you do not have to pick a portrait to do as your master copy, but I would strongly advise that you select a master painting that somehow reflects what you want to do with your journey of art. So if you really want your strength in landscapes, then look to the landscape masters, especially along the lines of what you particularly like. If you like the Hudson River School, more polished classical, select something along that line, or if you prefer George Inness and more tonalist quality landscape, or whatever. If you would like to do still lifes and you like more the impressionistic approach to still lifes, Monet would be a wonderful one. Cezanne, if you prefer that. Also, if you prefer a more tightly polished, some of the Dutch masters still life artists, or of course Chardin, who's my favorite. And of course, if you're into portraits, I'm going to be using this Rembrandt self-portrait as like I said, a segue into portraiture. He's my favorite portrait artist. I like that impressionistic style. If you like more of a polished portrait, you might want to look into the works of Bouguereau or Ingres or just others, Vermeer. I'll put it in the workbook so you have those names so you can look up. If you like more of the impressionistic style, you could look at Sargent, of course Rembrandt, Velasquez, and others along that line, Renoir. All right, so let's get started. You should have your picture next to you on your computer, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to get started on this. In our first week here, I'm just going to be doing laying it in and getting the values in place. Next week, we're going to be adding more color. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so what I have here is a 16 by 20 vertical linen canvas, and I've put a tone over the whole thing that is predominantly burnt sienna and yellow ochre. All I'm going to use today for painting is the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue. I'm just going to use those to establish my values and figure out size, placement, and all that. All right, so the first thing I want to do is figure out where he's going to sit on this canvas. I think I'm just going to use a smaller size 2 brush. So just with my Gamsol and my Bounty paper towels, my paint, making a nice little Subi mixture down here on my palette. You're probably not going to be able to see what I'm mixing on my palette, but that doesn't matter because it's just really basic today. So this small brush is just going to help me figure out where he's going to sit on this canvas. So I'm looking at the top of his hat and the distance relationship between that and the top of the canvas. And as he comes over here, I'm looking at the space from the edge of his hat over to the edge of the canvas. It's about like that. And then this just kind of hides off into oblivion. Over here, this is all very dark. So that means that if that's about how much space I give his hat, it has to fit in this sort of spectrum right in here. That means his face is going to be about, compared to the size of his hat, about this. I'll measure and everything and I'll double check that, but if he's about in here, that's close. And if you're doing a master copy that is very, very tight and like Ingres or David, then you could go ahead and measure and draw and take the time. When I went to the atelier, and I'll talk more about this as we get into portraiture. When I went to the atelier, we would draw the painting itself on a separate piece of paper. So we'd have our model set up before us, and we draw it in great detail, all of the shadows, everything mapped out, and then you transfer that drawing onto a canvas with the use of tracing paper and so forth. And that's just how we did it there. That's sort of the classical approach. I preferred the direct approach where I'm just putting it right on the canvas, and I'm pretty sure Rembrandt did the same thing. And I would imagine, I've studied under David Lafell, and he spent a lifetime studying Rembrandt's works and how he did it, and What I show you here with the toned canvas and the laying it down like this is very much how Lefel goes about his painting. And he studied Rembrandt, so I'm going to guess that this is what he garnered from his years of studying Rembrandt. So I'm making these decisions on where the collar is and his shoulder based on where I see, the edge of his collar coming in line with the edge of his hat and his ear in here, and just making those decisions as I'm going along. This is all going to be dark in here. His neck is here, and then this collar kind of juts out like this. And what I like about painting your drawing on the canvas is you can be loose and you can move things around and you can figure things out as you're going. I prefer not to use pencil because the sooner I can get my brain in painting mode, the better it is. Because now I'm thinking about mass, I'm thinking about values and where these objects are going to sit in relation in mass and bulk. With a pencil, you're doing this. And I just prefer not to do that. I'll get in there and work on his face later, but for now, I'm feeling that this is taking on a good solid structure, that it matches what I see in the reference over here. So he's got these two beaded things that are really cool. They hide back here into shadow. So this comes down. And I'm looking at this negative space back here where the redness of his shirt, what is that shape? I didn't think I'd do his hand, but it just kind of fits in there, so we'll just squeeze it in. And I have to make it more vertical. And it goes down like that. And then this hand, this is all a nice dark rich shadow. There. That has a little bit more sense of space. Okay, so now let's get back up here and we'll kind of tighten this up and I'll double check my measurements. So I decided that his hat was here. I think I may have to bring it up a little bit. So if this is the spectrum for his hat, that height there, I'm going to check it on my picture and see how many hats down his faces. So here's how that'll make sense. So I'm extending my arm, locking my wrist, and or my elbow, and I'm taking my thumb, and the tip of my thumb is aligning itself with the bottom of his hat over there, and the tip of the brush is aligning itself with the top of his hat. So that's what I'm doing over here. That is one measurement. Now I'm going to take that, and without moving my thumb, I'm moving my arm down, and I'm putting the top of the brush right here, over there, and I'm looking to see where my thumb hits on his face. And it's just about at his mouth. So let's come over here. There's that hat measurement. So if we come over here, then that means his mouth is about there. I think what I need to do actually is bring this down because I think the hat is too small. So if I make that hat space a little bigger, then that might accommodate for the face. Okay, good. I feel better about that. So now his mouth is going to be about there, which makes more sense. And the hat is bigger, which I felt it needed to be anyway. Okay, so that's that first measurement. I'm just going to double check. I'm going to grab that measurement again. I'm comfortable that this is going to be my measurement of truth. This one I will use to measure everything. I've determined that that's accurate for the whole painting. Now I'm going to go around and use that same measurement here on my brush, moving my arm down. Is that his mouth? If I go down to his mouth and then down, it is just about at the first one of those. So I come here, grab that measurement. This is my truth. There's his mouth. Putting the tip of my brush at his mouth then, I come down, and I need to bring this up a little, right up there. So that's how we just check our measurements as we're going along. Just like in the very beginning lesson of drawing, when we were doing checking our measurements, that's exactly the same thing. So keep those little marks on there. So we're going to use those. So now I'm going to take this measurement and go across and check that width as we're going along. I can continue to check measurements down here and figure out how many hats high he is, and I'll work on that in a little bit. So grabbing this measurement here. You also want to make sure your brush is not tipped this way or this way, because that can alter your reading. So try to keep it really perpendicular. And if you gotta lock your arm. I'm squinting one eye down. I'm doing this. Squint one eye down, and then it makes it easier to see that measurement. So now I'm going across his face, and I'm putting my thumb at the far edge over here and determining how wide that eye, the width of his eyes is, whatever. So let's determine that this is the side of his face. So this measurement here, according to the drawing, came just about to the edge of his eye. It was a little further beyond. So his hair starts about here. So that means his eyes are going to fit in this window. And I always try to give myself an eye line because sometimes the head is tilted a little. So just check with your brush to see the exact angle that the eyes are sitting on with each other. If they are not on the same line, it's going to look off. Okay, so I'm satisfied with that. Now checking how far over, like how many hats wide is it? Okay, so let's grab that measurement again. And then let's say from the top of his hat, right at this point, I'm going to measure how many hats across it is. So there's 1, and 2 extends out to here. So going like this, there's 1, and then 2 extended out to about here, so that's fine. I'm content. I'll work out all these little angles and things in there too that are really interesting, and this subtle shape in here and all that. He's got a darker brim kind of as this works its way around, but we'll deal with that later. So the rest of this hat goes right into this black shadow over here. It's kind of, you can kind of see it if you get really close. Rembrandt was a master at getting all of his subtle values. They're so subtle and so close. So I'm going to work on trying to get just the smallest degree of change in the darks, which is really interesting. Okay, so let's just give this big value here real quick. It's not the accurate value, but I want to mass it in because, again, we're thinking in terms of mass. Just darken that whole thing in. The sooner you can get a passage where there's sort of a solid value, the better you'll feel about where you're going with things. Okay, oops. So his hair, his ear, I'm content with the placement of the eye line. And the hair comes down, out like this. And then this is all dark back in here. Okay, so if this is the side of his face over here, not getting into the real subtle contours at the moment, just going to keep it very simple. Remember, if his mouth is here, that means the turn of his cheek will be here, and his chin will come about here. And I'm just kind of trying to get some of these subtleties as I see them in here. So I can take my brush, and I just dipped it in the Gamsol because I want to pull out a little bit of this highlight in here. Looking at, let's just draw a plumb line on his face. So here is his, I'm going to draw a plumb line, or I'm just holding it up to see where this vertical line splitting his face in half cuts his hat in half. So coming over here, if I draw this down, I'm locking my pinky on the edge. Getting this accurate too. Sometimes you may be doing a portrait where this line is this way or this way. Whatever you do, this line and your nose line and your mouth line have got to be parallel. These all have to match each other. Okay, so double check that. And this line is always perpendicular. So if your eye line's going like this, and your nose and your mouth, this line is going to be that way too. It has to be a right angle there. Okay? All right, so that's fine for now. We'll just move on beyond here for just a sec. All right, now, I think that this comes out a little farther. All right, I'm tempted to get going on his face, but let's make sure that everything else is in place. So I'm going back to my truth here, and I'm going to measure again then how far down and how far across everything is. Taking that measurement, and then I'm going to go down from that first chain on down. Where's the next one? It's almost down to the hand. So let's do that. So here's that measurement of truth. And then we had to come down here, and it was almost down to his hand. So that means the hand is up here, and this chain is a little closer than I thought. Because I have to account for this much negative space in here. So here's his hand. And that makes sense. Okay, getting it done. All right, now I'm going to take that measurement and see how many across he is. Okay, got it. Now I'm going to come to this shoulder point because I kind of see that right in this spectrum here where it drops down. And with my thumb on that point over here, I see that that distance goes right to the thing at the base of his neck. So this distance here, there it is. Okay, that goes right to the neck, so I feel good about that. Now I'm going to see how many across it goes. Grabbing that measurement again. Okay, right, putting my thumb at the neck thing. It goes right over to the start of that chain. And then about over to his trapezius. Okay, so let's grab the accurate measurement. Starting here. Okay, that does start right at the chain there. That's good. And then, yep, right over there. So we'll bring that in just a bit. Just about like that. Always look for those angles. This just comes down like this. This is all blackness in here. So his hand just tucks in here, the sleeve. I've done quite a few Rembrandt self-portraits, and every single time I do one, it's always such a delight. And I look into his eyes and I wonder, you know, what he was like. would imagine he was a pretty down-to-earth kind of guy. He and his wife Saskia ended up having, I forget how many miscarriages. Oh gosh, like 6? It was a lot. And they finally had a baby named Titus. They named him Titus. And so he loved Titus dearly. And then, I don't know how it happened, but Saskia ended up dying while Titus was still young. So Rembrandt, he did marry again and had more children, but I don't know that he ever got over her. He loved her very much. And in fact, after that point, you can see a marked difference in his self-portraits. He looked sadder, and it's just really emotional. There was a painting he did called The Night Watch, and it had, back then, they would do company photos by having an artist paint everybody, and they all pay the same amount. They're all patrons, so they pay the same amount of money. And they hired Rembrandt to do this group picture, and so he did. But Rembrandt, being the artist, chose to pull some portraits out as stronger and push some back as into the shadows, because he was making a beautiful painting rather than recording a moment in these people's photographic history. So he painted this, and in fact, he took it a step further and put a child in the middle of the painting and put the spotlight right on her, which really made a lot of people upset. And they demanded he change the painting, and he said, no. And so he ended up losing a lot of commissions as a result. And by the end of his life, he died penniless and friendless. And the only thing they say he had in his possession was his Bible. And I think that that's pretty remarkable. So I always feel honored to paint his portrait. The man knew suffering, and he knew pain. And I think that in his youth, he was, just judging from all of his portraits and the attitude in his face and who he was, that he was very much full of himself and probably kind of cocky and whatever, but life was, he had a lot of lessons in life, and you can tell by the end he was very humble. Okay, now, I'm kind of content where this is going for now, so I'm going to get up in here and start working on the face. So, I am going to figure out where the eye placements are, and I may not be doing much talking here, but I will zoom in the camera and just let you watch. Getting this hat line a little bit more accurate. It's very critical getting the eyes in the right placement and the right character. That was what he was all about. And if you're going to do someone especially like Rembrandt, his eyes were the window to his soul. And just take the extra time and get them right. Take the care that he would have taken. It's doing someone honor to paint their portrait. And so I always try to make sure that if I do one, that the eyes are the window to the soul. And so I really feel that they are the most important part of getting the face to be right. And I try to get this triangle in between the eyes and the nose relationship correct as possible, as early as possible. And I'm looking where the tip of his nose hits this eye. Oops. I'm going to make this bigger on the screen. Now that I'm done measuring, you can blow those images up a little. Which is why I love doing this on a computer screen. And I get those beautiful colors. If I'd printed this off, it would not have been the same brilliance. Sometimes you can just work on the 3 different values while you're going along. It might help you too to try to clean your brush off, wipe it off very well, and see if you can pull out some of the highlights to help get a little bit more of an accurate reading on his face. I'm just softening this a little bit with my paper towel. Just where I wiped out. Pull that down under the nose too. And then I want to just kind of soften it down the cheek a little, just to help feel like the form is starting to emerge. Earlobe, chin. And then there's this nice bright highlight on his neck down here. Just want to scrub that in place. Oops. All right. So I think for now, I'll stop there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish something on here, now just the face, as truth. And now that things are kind of more or less in place, I'm going to just start checking my measurements and see where I am for getting everything in the correct relationship with each other. So let's establish from the edge of the nose to the edge of the face as truth. I'm going to just kind of make sure that this is as good as I can get it from this area to here. Okay. Oh, I'm going to make this a little bigger. So from the edge of the nose, that eye almost touches it. Should be a little bit higher, so wiping my brush off. I'm going to start this eye up in here. Feels better. So then this passage in here is the ocular cavity, and it kind of comes angled and down this way. So then the edge where the temple is over here, I just want to establish this as that boundary. Okay, so the corner of this actually comes up a little higher. Okay, so now let's go through here and double check measurements. So if this is this, then I'm going to go by everything else from there. So getting that measurement, locking my arm, making sure my brush is parallel to the screen, I'm establishing the measurement from the bridge of his nose to the edge of his face, and that's the distance. So now I'm going to, from the bridge, going to measure over how many eyes that way it is, and then how many eyes from the bridge of his nose right here downward it is, maybe how many eyes across this is. And so I'm checking those measurements on here. So that's what I'm going to do now. So from the bridge of the nose, I'm going that way. That goes to the middle of his eye over here. So taking this measurement, it does go to the middle of his eye. So I got that there. I'm just going to double check it again. Yeah. Even still, I think it could be moved over just a tiny bit. Like that. I'm wiping this off so that I can sort of scoop this out just a little. Oops. So his eye is shaped in here a little bit more like this. And I can get in here later and get more of that fine tuning. For now, it's just sort of establishing where it is. I want to get this other eye in here so that they're both looking in the correct direction. I think I need to move this eye. The nice thing about this too is if you're just painting onto the canvas your image, instead of erasing and damaging your canvas with all the little detail-y things around here, it's so much easier just to move it over a little bit with your brush, wiping it off as you need to. Scoop out some of the paint. Okay, so the eyes are in place. Still needing a lot of work, but at least they're in place. Okay, now I'm going to go back and get that same measurement and measure over how far over the temple is, and then I'm going to go downwards from there, and also how high the forehead is, or at least where the hat line is exactly from those eyes. Okay. From the edge of his face to the bridge of his nose, coming over to the bridge of his nose, to his eye. Okay. So then the next measurement comes to about the middle of his temple. So here is this first one. Okay. I'm coming over here. Okay, so I have that about in place. All right, now I'm going to wipe my brush off and moving some of the darker value back. I want this a little lighter in here because it's representing the lit part of his skin, and I can draw this way too by removing paint to help slide it around and reveal a lighter value in there. So I'm looking at all these subtle angles in here as the skin comes and touches the hair in this area. And I'm doing that just by rubbing and wiping. I can even rub a little bit with the paper towel. Okay, and then I'll just kind of lightly press lighter and lighter as the light cascades down the side of his face. I'm wiping most of the Gamsol off of my brush when I do this because some of them I don't want it really, really light or like the white of the canvas. So I only want the bristles of my brush lightly coated with a little bit of Gamsol so that I don't remove too much value, too much darkness. But sometimes you need some of that little darker tone on there. Okay, so then right in this area in the mouth is where the canine tooth is. And so there's going to be a lighter patch here as inside the skull. That's where the bone structure is. And I'm going to actually really pull out this highlight now on his nose. Just rubbing that spot. Taking my paper towel, just taking a little chunk, and you roll it into a point like this. You can go in there and just really clean that up. Of course, we'll get all that more with paint when we get to that part, but for now, that's a great way to clean that up there. You get too much paint on your brush, you have to wipe it off as you're lifting off paint off of the canvas. You can even take smaller brushes. I've got some really high-end, high-quality brushes down. I keep down in my little container down here. Oh, very high-end. Walmart Extraordinaire. You can get packs of them for a few dollars. These are nice to have on hand, though, because a little bit of Gamsol on here. Look at that. Now you can wipe off itty-bitty teeny little passages. Get some of that effect. Part of the secret is in what you wipe off, too. Not wiping off too much. Just kind of cleaning up some of these edges and areas of subtle contours. in the nose as the light comes down the bridge, and then it gets softer right about here. Sometimes only your finger can get it just the right appropriateness of softness. Okay. And then just rubbing out some of this nostril there. Now we're going to grab some of this darker, put this in where the darkness is here. And then under here. Now this side over here. Okay, so I'm kind of feeling pretty good about this passage in here. And I'm going to go back through here now and again start checking the measurements. Ugh. Okay, so I want to check the distance from the tip of his nose to his cheek, so I'll compare it to my measurement that I've been using up here. Just cleaning that up a little bit. Got a little bit lost there. Okay, so coming back over here, grabbing that measurement, and then seeing if I bring the point of my brush down to the point of his nose, that mark is cut in half. So I had to clean up the edge of his nose. Okay, so here's this, and then that is cut in half. So I need to bring his cheek in closer. So this angle of his cheek over here comes down, and then it comes in, and then back out. And then I'm looking at the negative space back here behind his head to really try to get those angles just as I see them on there. Looking at where the point of his chin down here falls in line with the rest of his face. So point of that chin touches the middle of his nose, or off to the side a bit, and then the corner of his eye. So the corner of his eye, edge of his nose, down to the corner of his chin right there. So that is all lining up. Okay, before I start going too far on his chin, I want to make sure that the distance from his nose to his mouth and his mouth to his chin is the correct width. So grabbing my measurement from the bridge of his nose to the edge of his face, turning my brush, then I'm going to go under his nose, and that space goes just about to where his chin is highlighted down below. So taking this measurement here, so there it is. And then under his nose, so the highlight has to start about here, and then it's a little lower. Okay, so these two round patches are about down here. That makes more sense. Okay, so now the rest of the game pieces are in place. So I'm going to draw a line from, I'm checking where the corner of his mouth is straight up. Runs by the edge of his nose, way over on the edge, to the middle of his iris. Okay. Right about there. And then this one on this side, drawing a line straight up. Where does it hit the eye? Right as the iris turns. Okay, so that's right in the right spot. All right, so the mouth has a subtle contour. It's mostly done by hard edge, soft edge. So we've got a darker accent right here, and then a darker accent on this side, and the rest is kind of soft in the middle. So then there's like a divot right here, and his facial hair, its mustache, comes in this passage right in here like this, and there's just this nice golden sort of, it's almost felt more than really painted, so it's very subtle right in here. You can just kind of lose some of that edge there to suggest that there's a mustache in here. And it kind of curls up over here. Okay, and then we have shadow contouring down here. So this edge here gets lost. And the lower lip is mostly identified as a shadow underneath it. As such. And then there's the sides over here that curl back down the chin. And same with over here, under it. So squinting down at his chin, there's a triangle here created by just the shadows. And like that. We'll pull a little bit more of a highlight out of his lip here. And out of the middle. Okay. So then there's some subtle value changes in this lower area here. It's so mealy, I guess, kind of the way to describe it. So there's subtle ins and outs and stuff of the flesh. I'm looking at this nose here, it's kind of there. That's better. Okay. Okay, so there's a little bit of lighter tone in here and here. So I want to soften some of this passage in here, just very subtly. His neck. Again, like I said earlier, it has a highlight going back that way. Okay, grabbing some paint, looking to see where these folds in his neck connect with the collar. And there's this really nice continuity here of this fold with the darkness of his collar here. So we will draw that in place, and then there's another one over here that kind of goes in front of that collar. And finishes down here. So I think that that's the accurate value. I'll add some more glow to that passage as I'm painting it with some of the other colors. Next week you'll want to include cadmium red light onto your palette, if you haven't. If not, you'll want to get it. Cad red light is a good one. If you can't find it, you can probably try to just use cadmium red medium. And if you can't find cadmium red medium, or you don't want to paint with cadmiums because for whatever health reasons, some people choose not to, a healthier alternative is Napthol, N-A-P-T-H-O-L, red. And I'll put all that in the workbook as well. We're going to sculpt some of that back in. It got wiped out. Okay, and this one comes down, just bringing them back a little bit. And make this a little darker in here. You can make it a little darker by adding more ultramarine blue. Alright, so I think that we're kind of getting about to the place where I can spend a little bit of time now on the background, getting some of that where I want it, and pushing some of these values here a little bit more. think that that value is better. I just kind of knocked it down a little bit. Oops, too bright. Okay. Now, putting that one down, I'm going to get a bigger brush, get a little more aggressive with the background and the shape of his hat. So laying my palette down so I can get in there. I'm going to use a little bit of linseed oil now because I am actually applying color with the purpose of it being the final layer on his hat. So working on this shape here. It's really almost just a flat black. I mean, I'm not using black, but you mix up ultramarine blue and burnt sienna to get this exact shape. Okay, so if you experience a glare while you're painting, you can just alter the weight, the angle that you lay the brush strokes down just a little bit. As long as if it's kind of just a flat area, then you can do that. Otherwise, we do have to be cognizant of allowing our brush strokes to show form, but in this passage in here, it's very much just kind of a flat black area. So while I'm still trying to be cognizant of showing the form of this, I am trying to be considerate of that you really can't see if there's too strong of a glare. Okay, and while I have that dark black, I'm going to lay it elsewhere where I see it. I actually want a bigger brush for this. Let's get crazy. Let's use this one. I want a little bit of thinner. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. This is going to help us just get a value down quickly. Again, being cognizant of my brush strokes and the angle that they are laid in, just to help identify the form in here. whole passage down here is very dark. A little more blue. Okay. All right, that's fine for an undercoat. This gives us a good strong value base to work from as we move forward. All right, now I'm going to establish the value on the background. So that is, again, just the same mixture. I see a little bit more blue behind him, which is interesting that he would bother with that separation, because coolness is in the background and there's a little bit of more sienna in this black that I'm applying to his coat, so that we have that separation there between background and what he's wearing, near and far. Cool is in the background, warm is up front. So the background was black, but it was made a bluer black, and then his jacket is black also, but it was made a warmer black. So I want a little bit of a separation from his hat to his background. I don't want to lose the integrity of the drawing there, so I'm being careful to let this brushwork here just kind of do its thing up here. I'm going to let some of that ochre color shine through. I'll come back through here and refine that a little more. But let's just grab some ochre, might as well. Just put that up there. I really like this color as it's showing up around his hat. And I'm wiggling the edge of the brush just right up close that way to help with that contour. Okay. Now we go into a darker passage in here, and again, it's just that darker tone that I was using. And this is just the first layer of the background. I'm sure I'll be working more into it before this is finished. Let's get some more blue in there. Bring out his jacket a little more in here. Okay. coming back through here, I just want to refine some of these edges before I wrap it up for day one. I don't like this brush, so I just got this one. Grabbing some sienna and blue, and I just want to kind of clean up some of these edges. Okay. I just wanted a little bit more separation in here as I stopped for the day. All right, that's probably good for that. All right, well that wraps up the first session of our 6th module on master copy painting. I hope that this has been helpful, and next week I will be adding color, and I hope you guys are able to get this far and take as much time as you need during the week, and then next week we'll talk about what color. Okay, thanks guys.